ask them that it all go on the website so that we aren't sending separate attachments and separate flyers and separate information. So it should be pretty streamlined when schools have questions of anything regarding the DCHHS health rules, that we can direct them to that website and they should be able to find whatever information they're looking for. All of the information in terms of lead testing labs that have been approved to receive funding are all listed there, as well as the process for how they sketch out their floor plans as it goes to DEQ. So I think they've done a pretty good job and a pretty fast turnaround with getting those resources available, and we're hoping to have that out today.
Okay, good, thank you. Any questions for Tracy? All right, thank you. Okay, the Essa update is in your handout, and currently Julie is in Poplar, so I will just quickly review this overview that she has provided. She has created a document that talks about the 18-19 accountability designations under Essa, and how those will be determined this month for February 2020. The federally required indicators, as we've talked about, academic achievement for ELA, reading and math, and the academic growth on statewide assessments for ELA, reading and math, K-8 only, English learner progress. So for the ELs, graduation rates for high school. And the fifth indicator for Montana flexibility, the attendance, college and career readiness for high school, and CRT science assessment, which was for the 16-17 school year. Comprehensive schools, lowest performing 5%, and the next identification for comprehensive schools will be 21-22 school year. So looking at next year for that occurring. Targeted as well, that the targeted being looking at the performance of all student subgroups in relation to all Title I schools overall. And universal, again, just that they have a graduation rate above 67%. We're looking at report cards, deploying report cards as of March 16th, and that will include the per pupil expenditure, which is the new part for the report card, and we've looked at drafts of that, and so we're getting more refined in terms of requests that we're asking, so it's easily understood and easily readable for districts. And then you've got the time frame there. Hopefully those of you who are on the phone do as well. Trying to think if there's anything. School climate survey. There is a lot of conversation within the agency talking about the school climate survey. What reliable and valid survey tools would look like. There has to be uniformity. We've figured that out. We cannot just have a lot of different surveys and be able to compile that information or be able to say that they have utilized a survey. There are, again, benefits and challenges in putting this into the accountability system, and making sure that there's an appropriate use or that it's meaningful is basically where we are on the climate survey. And I know, Tracy, you've been involved in a lot of those discussions. Am I forgetting anything that?
No, I think those are the big pieces. Certainly a lot of the research that's out talks about school climate and just making sure that if you're looking at school climate that you are, the recommendation is that you only look at whether or not a school is assessing their school climate, but not giving points based on the results of that climate survey.
Right.
And so then it becomes a conversation of how do you meaningfully differentiate that for schools. So We're looking at other states. We're talking to the developer of the U.S. Department of Ed survey, trying to just get a handle on what other states are doing and how they've been able to tackle this, because it is important, and we do want to recognize that that was a conversation that the stakeholders had back when the Essa plan was written, but we're trying to figure out how to do that in a meaningful way.
Right, so yeah, thank you for those additional comments. And then college and career readiness measurements, looking at that portion, those students determined to be part of a college or career track, benchmark for college, the ACT composite, or a concentrator in a career technical pathway. And so we're collecting that information. For Perkins 5, it used to be 3 classes made a student a concentrator. It will become 2 with the next school year. That those are the ones considered concentrators. And completion, again, that includes the dual enrollment, the AP, or even taking IB. And I'm trying to think if there's, she's given you a table there to look at in terms of the points and what she's looking at. But that's, I guess, her one-page update for where we are right now. And I believe she presented this to the Education Interim Committee as well. And so they received this information, which was good. Again, she is in Poplar. Poplar chose to go with Cognia and diagnostic testing. And so she is there getting a better grasp of that process. And so we'll see where that goes. And then she is going to be convening her Mighty 5 on the 23rd and the 24th so that she can work more with those comprehensive schools as well. Anyway, any questions I can give to Julie or try to answer within okay, thank you. Okay, Cheryl, comments, and for those on the phone, we do have an additional handout that we're looking at, so we'll be sending that to you as soon as possible, but that's what she's referring to, so if you would, Cheryl, thank you.
Thank you. So we're looking at Montana Advanced Opportunities Act this morning. A couple things to point out. First and foremost, this is planned to be permanent funding for school districts. And as we look at that funding increase over time, it continues to grow. We know out of fiscal year 2021, we had 9 districts that were funded, 1 partial district funded with $750,000 available. The overall requests were closer to $1.2 million of districts that applied for funding. So we know going into fiscal year 22, there will be $1.649 million available, with $1.201 of that already claimed from fiscal year 21, and so at least about $447,000 for new districts to apply and get funded. And then we continue to see that growth. So in fiscal year 23, when the $1.649 is claimed, it'll be $2.5 million, so about $856,000 for new districts. Fiscal year 24, as we continue that cycle, there will be about almost $889,000 available for new districts. So the goal behind this particular act is full funding for all school districts. It's important to note that districts need to apply in order to get funded, that they're required to do annual reports to get requalified for funding. And a key component of this particular legislation that was passed in this act is there's a 60-40 split, with 60% of the funds going to offset parent costs, whether it's dual enrollment, whether it's certifications, whether it's travel for internships. 60% are offsetting parent costs, and minimum, and what's remaining can be used to support career and technical education courses by district. So we are closed. We are through our first round with this year with advanced opportunities in fiscal year 21. And just a note on House Bill 351, or transformational learning, that window closes for fiscal 21 on Friday.
Okay. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Maybe we did have a meeting last week at the SAM office, just as a recap, and it was well attended by the education partners, and we had, I thought, a very good discussion in regard to 351 and 387.
A lot of discussion around the first come, first served model of selecting districts. That seems to be one of those lightning rod points that we're working with our advocates on, and is certainly being looked at by the Interim Education Committee as well, as whether or not that is our most effective model to use.
Okay, thank you very much, Cheryl. And that leads us to Dwayne. He's going to fill in for Ashley, like he said, talking about the assessment. And if it's all right, I might preface this a little bit, Dwayne. We, based on our peer review and what we know, we haven't done or been able to collect information to document that districts are really adhering to or paying attention to test security. So we started this fall by trying to get the test administrators to complete the fact that they knew and understand what they need to do for test security. We had a return as of 2 weeks ago of 14.69% from the field that they, had an awareness and really good understanding, and so that's not helpful, not nearly helpful enough to us to ensure that, test security is high on their radar as much as it is on ours. So with that, we reached out again. I think there have been better results, but it's something that we need help with, everyone, to reach out to the school districts and let them know that this is, something that's high priority. So.
Thank you. And part of this presentation, Marcy and I just did a morning update on this, so we have the latest update numbers.
Awesome. Thank you, Dwayne.
So with this, if you kind of look at it, we're just gearing up for the assessment window, so it's very, very busy time of year right now, and looking at test security, modcast, testing windows, participation, and definite requests that you touched on. And just for those of you who are not aware, some of those of you who are aware, this would be half of it, but I guess responsibility for testing security here ties in with your OPI, the state role, and then you have your authorized representative, and that comes down to usually the superintendent, and then your system test coordinator as assigned by the superintendent and teams, and then your building coordinator and test administrator. And sometimes building coordinator is a moot point, depending on the size of the district. And then here, what we have is, going back to your point earlier, Joel, with the testing incidents last year, if you look at it during the 2018-19 school year, we had 198 self-reported test incidents. And of those, 73 unique school systems, and the word systems is interchangeable with districts, to clarify that. So 73 districts reported these incidents, and what you look at that's highlighted over there, in kind of origination of this incident, 32% were with students, but the interesting component is 65% were with test administrators. And so breaking that down even further into its component parts, this next slide shows that you have the different categories during that component. So So misadministration was 24%, test security was 23%, and it kind of comes down to accommodations and PII. So I think, you know, when you look at some examples of what that could be, so misadministration or test security incidents, non-certified test administrator would be one of those incidents. Maybe you had a teacher who was coaching along a student during the assessment. Remember last year we had CRTs, paper tests, not secured, the paper test might not have been secured. And then ACT, because ACT is unique in the fact that it has a time component, it might have been assessed beyond the time. Those would be examples of that. Cell phones out testing security incident would be another one. And so those are just examples of what you could look at with test administration. But going back to that 55% were test administrator origination, what we really focused on is how can we reduce, if we can reduce some of those incidents, testing incidents. Then what we did is, as of February 1st, this is a test security agreement for, as well as testing plans across districts. And so with your school districts, you had, this was required to be completed November 1st is when this completion request was put in. And as of February 3rd, we had 45 of them completed, i.e. 14%. And you can see on the left-hand side, the required records tracking, right-hand side, system test with agreement. And then what we had also done is, on February the 3rd, we sent out a bunch of emails. And those emails were sent to system test coordinators within the district, and the superintendents were also copied on them. And we have received a flurry of activity. We've been really busy in assessment as a result of this, and with just a lot of questions, a lot of clarifying, you know, wanting to clarify what the roles are. But as of this morning, it's just actually about an hour ago, we have upped that to 189 districts that have completed these, to jumped it from 14 to almost 60%. So we have seen an increase in that. You know, there's still room there, so we still have the 40%, but at the same time, it's a substantial increase from where we've been.
Yeah.
So we have, like I said, we've seen a lot of improvement, and some of the calls were really quite simple. There were quite a few of the calls that STC system test coordinators would call in and say, hey, we completed it. And you go in and they had completed the test security component, but what they did not have completed was the records tracking component. So it's a matter of finishing those or misunderstanding of those, that there's two components to that. And so some of the resources for that we pointed them to was testing security page and manual, and these three highlighted are found on our website. Then we also have with our assessment conference, a lot of those resources will be available for districts here in the next week. Bulletins, assessment 411 newsletters and monthly webinars. So kind of with that, I'll shift over to the testing windows. We're coming up into, these are the 6 assessments, statewide assessments, access, which is oftentimes WIDA, called WIDA, and then your new Montana Science, alternate Montana Science, and then your MSAA, which is the alt for math and ELA, your Smarter Balance, and then with your math and ELA, and then ACT. Smarter Balance will be the first to open on the 9th of March, and then a week later, a lot of the others will be opening. We just closed on the 24th, or the 29th, sorry, and then the 24th will be ACT. And so what we've done is, because of the, in response to the Title I audit and Essa accountability and maintaining that 95% participation rate, one of the biggest things we've wanted to focus on is ensuring that we can help schools reach that 95% participation rate, and kind of aligning those non-participants. For example, we've done, it's a combination of desktop monitoring as well as on-site monitoring. We started piloting on-site monitoring last year. We'll continue to do that this year. And for example, one of the things we found with the WIDA test that just closed was we had quite a few of the assessments that weren't completed in the writing. There was a writing portion of it. And so we reached out to schools for those as they were finishing up, trying to increase those components. So this is kind of, I'm the Smarter Balance MSAA guy, so this is a bit of the wheelhouse that I work in, and this is, to me, very, very exciting news. If you look at that graph, from 2016 to 2019, you see an increase in numbers. You say, what are these numbers? This is the interim. These are the interims, both, there's two different types of interims, and I won't bore you with the details, but I'll put them in combination of these are the interims final numbers. So 16, 17, 18, 19 are the final numbers at the end of the year. Historically, our usage of interims has been highest January and February. So as of now, the numbers you see there in 2020 is as of 2/14. So I expect you're going to see some more growth before the school year is totally over. But you have seen a substantial increase in those numbers, and again, it's speculation as to why. We've exerted a lot of effort in assessment roadshows and training this fall. But if you look at those numbers in the districts using insurance, there's a substantial growth, and it's exciting because when I look at this, Robin Clausen from GEMS has taken some of the data from 2 years ago. He did it last year, he's doing it again this year, but last year's study found that students who are taking the summatives or have taken interims and they take the summatives, their scores increase compared to their peers. Statistically significant findings on that, meaning that if you take the interim, you'll score higher on that. And I've always been very curious going into the weeds on this a little bit as far as the causation of it. You know, I think it's familiarity with the technology. I think that's a component to it. Mm-hmm. And then the other one that's a qualitative measure that I'm very fascinated with is what is done with the data after the interims are given. You know, what do teachers use with the data? I think there's a lot of rich info to be found in there. But by and large, Robin is working on the interim use from last year. The results are showing the same. So hypothetically, if you look at Robin's studies, the increase of interims increased student scores on the summative. And then if you look at this, I think it's, one of our expectations is that you're going to start seeing increases in those summatives. I mean, that's if you look at the trajectory of what everything's pointing at. And so to me, it's pretty exciting. And that's kind of where I'll end it up. If there's any questions, I'll do the best I can to answer it. And, yeah.
Anyone have any questions for Dwayne? Okay, Pete?
I guess I'd be great. When students take the interim, is the feedback or results instantaneous for the student into their teachers?
It is. And last year it used to be. This year's it used to be last year that if you had a writing component, the hand scoring would have to be completed by the teachers. So what they've done this year is that it's changed, and the hand scoring is done with the computer-generated component. And we always, with the training I've done this fall, one of the things I've worked with schools on is having them look at the rubric and understanding what the rubric is and understanding what the scores mean when they see those scores roll in. As of now, what they have is any of those items are instantaneous that they take, and your writing scores will come back within 12 hours. You'll see those writing scores come back.
I think that would lend itself to the explanation that both the educators and the student understand what their areas that they need the most work in. You know, as you were saying that the students that take the interim are performing better. It's familiarity with the format, obviously, but I think that other component would probably, I know it's difficult to quantify that, and I think that would be helpful as well. So I'm glad to see those numbers are going.
And the interims, the two style of interims is the interim comprehensive, which is essentially just a model of the summative test, takes the same amount of time. But what we've seen a huge increase in is these interim assessment blocks. And what that is a standard. You take a standard and you assess students within that component, that standard. And so you can really hone in on where students, the areas of growth that you can make the largest area of growth with those students. And one thing we have seen that has never happened in the state before is I started getting a lot of calls from high schools. And high schools are wanting to use interims. And so we've seen an increase. Actually, when I say an increase, it went from flat 0 and to this year we have about 76. At this, about a week ago, we have high schools starting to use those. I feel it falls as far as transferring over using those as benchmarks.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And I think that as well, in the fall, there was the roadshow, and there's more assessment literacy being provided to teachers and to those test coordinators to help at the school level. So I think that's an important component as well, so. That part. Okay, any other questions? Are there any other items of interest that we haven't covered that anyone on the phone or here believes that is a hot topic at this point that we haven't discussed? Pete?
Well, just an announcement that the March Board of Public Ed meeting is going to be on Thursday, March 12th.
It's a one-day
meeting. It'll be on, because it had been scheduled on the calendar for the 12th and 13th, but it's going to be a one-day. So I want to make sure that people know that it's going to be on the Thursday, the 12th, as opposed to the Friday.
Yep.
Board didn't want to meet on Friday the 13th, even though I was born on Friday.
Oh, man.
That sealed the deal. It went to Thursday.
Yeah. So no, thank you for that, Pete, because we pass that along. Anything else pressing?
Cool.
Any of
Dan
you on the
Rask.
phone? Oh, Dan, yes, Dan.
Well, I just want to make all of you aware, and I'm sure most of you probably are, that the US DOE is issuing an opinion on a change in the manner with which REAP or SRSA funds are being distributed, which is having a pretty big impact in some of our rural states like Maine, Arizona, and Montana. At our round of workshops last week, I talked to one school who looks as if their grant award would go from 18,000 to about 7,500. So we're still kind of researching the impact for our own state. But even if it's not that many schools, when you look at some of our frontier schools, as you would know, their budgets are 100 or 120,000, of which, you know, the loss of $10,000 to $15,000 is pretty substantial. So we're gonna, you know, we're gonna get behind this with our own delegation in Washington and see if we can do anything. We may not be able to do anything for the next school year, but just want to make you aware if you're not aware, and I'll be sending out a kind of a summary of what's going on shortly on that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Yeah, I know that originally they said that they were going to go back to streamlining it so it wasn't so cumbersome, but I didn't realize that some of them were going to be impacted.
Well, they have done that, so that is a bonus. They have streamlined the application process and made it pretty direct towards the school districts. This is something really entirely different. An opinion on how there's an alternative method to determine what is the best grant for your school, and that's what's being challenged, the RLIS. And so Montanans haven't really taken advantage of RLIS as opposed to SRSA, if you're aware of those terms. One is pretty standard and uniform. The other is kind of an alternative method, which would give you a higher poverty percentage and therefore a higher grant amount. And so that's kind of where I'm at, finding out if that's what the deal is with Montana. It doesn't look like a lot of schools are going to be kicked off entirely, such is the case in Maine, where they had 110 schools that were using the grant, and they're going to be down to 40. So it could be pretty substantial.
Yeah, well, that definitely is something to keep our radar on, and I haven't talked to Jack because I know that through the Title I here, Jack O'Connor, you know, does the flow through and has the conversations with the US DOE on that. So, okay, so we'll keep that on our radar and have some more conversations. So thank you for that, Dan.
Thank you.
Is the change that and how they calculate, instead of being able to use your free and reduced lunch numbers, you have to use the U.S. Census poverty numbers?
Yes.
This is Jacob. Okay, so Jacob, you need to talk a little louder so everyone else can hear you.
Oh,
basically,
sorry.
that they went
Okay.
free and reduced. Go ahead, Jacob.
Is that better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, yeah, so they shifted previously for funds, you could use numbers that were just tied directly to your free and reduced lunch numbers, but now you have to use poverty numbers tied directly to the U.S. Census.
Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, that is the difference that could have a pretty good sized impact.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Dan. Anyone else? All right, if not, I appreciate everyone's time and involvement, and have a great Tuesday. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jewel. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.